What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's video. And first of all, yes, I did break my RB67. And yes, it was my fault and was preventable. And today I want to go over how that happened and how it could have been avoided, as well as show you the pictures from that shoot, and then I want to tell you how I fixed it. But for some context, we need to go back in time to when I said this. Now, I have a few projects, both video and photo, that I have in the works and that are more than just concepts. Like, I have full ideas and I'm ready to shoot them. They're just a lot bigger than some of the stuff that I have been doing. They're a lot higher scale and involve more people. Now, unfortunately, one of those shoots that I was talking about is the one we're talking about today, the one that I broke my camera during. Now, one of my goals with this channel has been to push myself. And now specifically, one of those ways I wanted to push myself was to try and up the production quality. Now, specifically, one of those ways that I wanted to push myself was to up the production quality of these videos by having a friend come along and maybe do some specific behind the scenes so I could focus more on the photo shoot and the concept and the idea and working with the model, and hopefully even show people how I interact more with the models. Now, prior to the shoot, I had been walking around a thrift store and I came across a briefcase that was super intriguing and was only like $5. So I ended up buying it and revolving the whole concept around this case. I've been super intrigued with lights and hiding lights, and for a while now I've wanted to do a more abstract or magical kind of a theme. So the concept was to take this little light and to hide it in the briefcase and leave it up to interpretation as to what the briefcase is or what it does or can do or what's in it, to then capture some images that would tell a story that would allow you to fill in the blanks. So I contacted a model and I was able to set up 2 different locations in order to tell this story. Unfortunately, the camera broke on the 10th frame at the first location. So for the second location, I ended up using my EOS R, and I'm not going to include those images in this video because they're digital and we're talking about film. So let's dive quickly into the behind the scenes video showing those first 10 frames, and then I'll tell you about the story. And that's when it happened. So it was night and I did bring some lights to work with, but it was still pretty dark. I was shooting a roll of Fuji Pro 400H, pushed 1 stop to 800. And I had the camera on a tripod just to eliminate the chance of any jitters. So for the last shot, I had to go out on the train tracks where it was uneven ground, so I lowered one of the tripod legs, making it shorter than the other 2 to make the camera level. The goal was to shoot the whole project on 2 rolls of film. So we had just finished the first roll, which wrapped that location, and I was super happy with the stuff that we had got that far. So I grabbed the tripod to quickly get off the tracks, and excitedly I went over to talk to my friend Steven, who was doing the behind the scenes, and Asia, the model. And again, I want to emphasize, this was nobody else's fault but my own. We talked for a little bit about how excited we were with how the project was going, and stupidly, without thinking, I set the tripod down, let go, and turned to start turning off the lights. Everything happened in a fraction of a second. I realized what I had done, that I hadn't fixed the leg, that the tripod was not sturdy, and that my baby was going down. Now everything was going so fast I didn't even hear it hit the ground, but by the time I turned around and looked at it, there it was, lens first, kissing the pavement. And with a million emotions and thoughts going through my head and not wanting to look like an idiot, I picked it up and looked at it, but I wasn't really looking at it because I was thinking of a million different things, but it actually looked okay. There wasn't any physical sign that it was broken. And I had convinced myself for a moment that the Pro Mist filter I had on the front had caught most of the blow and the force, and that it was fine. So I quickly brushed it off and pretended like everything was fine, and we moved on to the next location, where I proceeded to load the camera with a new film, get the shot all set up, and it didn't fire. Well, it half fired. You could hear the mirror try to move, but it would only move like halfway. So I recocked it and fired it again, same thing. So like I mentioned before, in hopes of not looking like a complete idiot, I shot the rest of the shoot digitally and then tended to my hurt pride and broken camera. So later that night, upon inspection, I took the lens off and I tried firing it again, and without the lens mounted, the camera worked. The mirror flapped and the film advanced. So it had to be something with the lens. So let's look at this lens. This is the Mamiya Secor 90mm lens, the one that came with the camera. Now, one of the things that drew me to the RB67 in the first place is the fact that the individual components on it can be interchanged. Meaning, if the lens is broken, I just need to replace the lens and I don't have to buy a new camera. All the RB67 lenses have leaf shutters inside, which means that the lens basically controls everything, specifically the aperture and the shutter. The camera body really doesn't do anything. Normally, when the lens is functioning correctly, you should be able to push this little button down and move these to the side to open and close the shutter. But that doesn't work with this lens anymore. So I took it apart and I looked inside, and some of the internal mechanics had been broken. And it didn't look like I was going to be able to fix it by myself quickly, if cheaply. Luckily for me, literally the next day, someone I follow on Twitter said that they were selling the exact same lens for about $100. Now, $100 for me was a perfectly acceptable price to get the camera working again. So I went for it. I reached out to the guy and I made the purchase, and he sent me the lens. And he did mention that there might be a little bit of fungus growing inside the lens, but it hadn't affected any of his images so far. But you know, better safe than sorry, so when I got the lens, I checked it out and I could see a little bit of fungus. And I knew at the back of my mind it would probably just drive me crazy even if it affected the image or not, especially since the glass on my lens was perfectly fine. And since they were the same lens, all I had to do was take the perfectly fine glass from my lens and the perfectly working mechanics from his lens, and voila, my camera works again. So what's the moral of the story? Don't be an idiot.